In this video, we're going to do hip lifts and hip drops, which may look the same, but when you're walking, it looks different. When we're drilling hip lifts, you're going to start with your feet together, your knees bent, belly button pulled toward your spine, so we're not fully engaging the lower abs, but they are slightly engaged. Chest lifted, and arms are out. So you're going to think about your shoulders and your hips as the corners of a rectangle here. And you're going to bring your hip, this corner, up into the rectangle and back down. Up and back down. There's two pretty common ways of doing this. So from my experience, a lot of the Egyptians, they use their knees for the movements. So you would straighten that leg to bring the hip up and bend it to bring it down. And that's how you would get the up movement. With a more muscular approach, what you would do is start in that same position, still slightly tucked, and then you're going to squeeze your glutes. So with this way, you are not using your knees or your legs for the movement. In fact, if you alternate squeezing your glutes back and forth, you actually should be able to hold something in between. I don't have a case on this, so I hope I don't drop it. You should be able to hold something in between your knees and still get the hip movement. This is what I do normally in my classes, but when I'm dancing or, sometimes when I shimmy, I use my legs instead of the glutes. It's really good to just learn both ways, and that's why I teach both ways. So just drill with me for a minute. We're going to do the glute squeeze hip lifts. So you're going to have your feet together, knees bent, belly button toward the spine, and alternate squeezing your glutes. So at first, it's going to be a very small movement. You're going to be squeezing down here. When you build up that muscle, you will be able to squeeze up higher. So if you kind of dig your fingers in right here and try to squeeze that spot, you'll get more of a movement. If your hips are not moving very far, it's either because you need to strengthen your glutes or because you're not bent down far enough. If I straighten my legs and then try to make that movement, it won't work. Okay? So again, regardless of the way that we do it, you're just moving your hip. We've got the straight line here, and you're moving your hip above the line and back down to make a hip lift. Now in this video, we're not going to walk with them, but this is what it looks like. When you walk, you would step with the right, squeeze with the right, step with the left, squeeze with the left. So whatever foot your weight is on, that's what hip is up, as opposed to a hip drop, which is the opposite. So that looks a little bit different. To do the hip drops, you're doing essentially the same thing as we were doing for the lifts. You're going to start in that same position, chest lifted, confident, smile, right? You're going to imagine that square, and then you're going to drop the hip below it. So you can either do it, and I suggest practicing both ways, by bending that knee to drop it down, or by squeezing the opposite side. So you're going to squeeze this glute to bring the other side down. So you see my hips are dropping below the square and then coming back to neutral. Below the square, back to neutral. Okay? When you're drilling this movement, the lifts and the drops in place, you're essentially doing the same thing. There's not a lot of difference until you start moving with it. So, if you were going to drill this movement, you would really just pay attention to your posture and alternate squeezing your glutes. If you're having problems with this, one exercise that I like to do with my students is to squat down like this so that you can't, your legs are engaged now, you can't really use them to produce the hip movement. And then alternate squeezing your glutes this way, because that'll help build up that muscle. You can also do it seated. So you would sit. You have to scoot a little bit forward. Make sure you're not sitting right down on, the bone back there. And then alternate squeezing on the floor. Once you get used to practicing on the floor, you want to make sure you keep your chest lifted, arms out. Okay. That concludes the hip lifts and drops lesson. Remember to practice.